Good afternoon, and welcome to the first in a series of dialogue, and that's exactly what we are hoping that it will be, dialogue. When we finish, we want to discuss and talk about some things for the legacy of East Cleburne. I'm going to ask Reverend Warren if he will come and give our invocation, and then Miss Katherine Easdon will come give us a welcome and an overview of the Booker T. Washington Recreation Center. Thank you.
Let us pray. Eternal and most gracious God, we know we are here because you are there. We thank you for being generous with us one more time. In the words of our ancestors, we understand and we know and have experienced that the four corners of our bedroom could have been the four corners of our grave. We thank you for being generous with us and giving us another opportunity. We ask for you to forgive us for the many sins, those by thought, word, and deed, and forgive us for the times that we have been rude and hateful to one another. We welcome you, Holy Spirit, in this place, that we might accomplish that which we have chosen to do. We're thankful for those who are here this evening, and we ask for bountiful blessings upon them and their loved ones, and stay with us when we leave this place. This is our prayer in the matchless, marvelous name of Jesus. I ask you to help me say, amen.
Welcome, everybody. We're super excited that y'all are here for the legacy of East Cleburne. We're excited to put this program on at Booker T. Washington Rec Center, where the high school used to be. Booker T. Washington Rec Center was actually built in 2009, or it was completed in 2009. The facility used to share with East Cleburne Community Center, and so they used to have different programs here, child care facility, some different activities for kiddos, and different activities for the adults as well. In 2015, East Cleburne Community Center decided to purchase their own building, and they went ahead and did their own programming right down the street, actually. And so that's when we became just the recreation center here for the city. Since then, I've been here for about a year, and we offer a couple different things. We offer volleyball on Thursday nights. We offer pickleball, as well as what else do we offer? I'm trying to think. We have a cardio room as well as a weight room, a banquet hall with a full service kitchen, as well as a computer lab that we're doing some different programming classes in as well. And so that's all we have. And we're actually going to have everybody come up and share who's involved with the program, kind of how they got involved with it and how they're part of the legacy of East Cleburne here. So.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Montero. I am the manager of the Leyland Museum of History here in Cleburne and also the Cleburne Railroad Museum. I've lived here about 4 years and just love being here. In terms of how I got involved in this, when I was a kid, my father used to tell stories about his childhood, and he told the stories, and he told the stories, and he told the stories. And in my entire childhood and youth, I heard them hundreds of times. And I thought I knew them backwards and forwards, and I always said I was going to record those stories, but you know how it is, they never got recorded. And now my father's gone, and I remember those stories, but there's always one very important detail that I just can't remember. My grandfather moved to Fort Worth to work in the stockyards. Did he work for Smith or did he work for Armour? I don't know. And it's so easy for those little details and for the big things to get totally lost in time. It's very frustrating and especially embarrassing for me to not know those things when I call myself a historian. one of the things you learn really quickly when you're interested in history is that the luckiest thing you can have is one of those people that's really just fascinated with history and with the story of a war or a family or a neighborhood, and is really holding on to those documents and that history. And if you're really lucky, then it gets put into the hands of somebody someplace, a library, a museum, a community center, somewhere where they can hang on to that history. And that's one of the things that the Leyland Museum is trying to do. Since I came here 4 years ago, I did become aware that the Leyland Museum did not have as much history of East Cleburne as I really wanted to have, and we're very hungry to have that. We do have some recorded interviews that were done, students from Booker T. Washington. We have some great things. We actually recorded a talk that Reverend Warren did on the Eagles of Carver Park a couple of years ago. We have some artifacts, but we don't have nearly as much as we would like to have. So we're so thrilled that all of these talks are happening and that they're going to be recorded and that we're all going to have access to all of this information, and hopefully we'll all start talking to one another. So if there's anyone out there that has wonderful memories and has wonderful history of anything in Cleburne, but particularly tonight, East Cleburne, I hope that they'll be willing to share and maybe come and talk to me. I brought business cards even. We are perfectly used to scanning photos and documents and giving them back. You don't have to give us things forever if that's not what you want to do. But do consider sharing that history with us. It's incredibly important, and we are so happy to be able to take part in this and looking forward to what we're going to learn over these next 7 talks. Thanks.
Now Miss Lisa Majors from Cleburne High School, or Cleburne ISD, will be coming up to share how she's involved as well.
Well, I was thrilled to receive a phone call inviting me to be a part of the team that would sit down and look at what this might look like. All I could think of is we're getting a gift. Our community is getting a gift. Our students are getting a gift. We are so excited with the prospect of having our high school students attend some of these wonderful lectures and presentations. History is so much more exciting and so much more vivid when it is done in spoken word rather than digging through a book. And we love our books, but when we hear it from those that experienced it or have those vivid memories to share, it just makes those thoughts, those stories truly come to life. So we're just so excited about this. We're excited from the standpoint of our teachers as well, what they will glean from this. So this is huge, and I do hope it's the start of other wonderful things, but we just can't wait. I'm glad to see several colleagues and co-workers here tonight. I know they feel the same way I do. So truly, Mr. Warren, Dr. Dollarhide, and City of Cleburne, again, we just thank you for this gift, because that's truly what it is.
I would say a few months ago, so I've been at the city for about a year, and a few months ago I had the opportunity of meeting Mr. Warren and talking to him a little bit about the history of the facility, because I wanted to know. I was working here and wanted to know what the high school was like, and through those conversations I feel like I got to hear a little bit of a glimpse of what that was and a glimpse of what life was like in East Cleburne. And so from conversations with Stephanie and us wanting to get together and try to create a program like this one to be able to share with the community, we thought it was just so very important to be able to share what life was like and to be able to continue that legacy that was here. It's actually a great opportunity just to be able to be part of the Parks and Rec Department here with the city, to be able to have a facility that was such a vital part of history. And so it's an honor to be able to do that here. And so.
I am Pastor Bill Wright from East Cleburne community, and I've been asked to talk about why the legacy of East Cleburne. And first of all, I apologize for being overdressed. I see everybody's otherwise, but I was not sure of that, so please forgive me on that. But I'm representing the East Cleburne Ministerial Alliance. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? I have been in Cleburne 8 years now, and so I'm still learning the city of Cleburne. It's a unique city, one of a kind, is very historical in my research, some from a positive and negative perspective. But let me give you a few facts about Cleburne. Number one is Johnson County's third county seat. The city was also formerly known as Camp Henderson, a temporary Civil War outpost for the Confederacy. The city of Cleburne was established March 23, 1867. And most of you know, maybe I should ask you the question, who is the person that the city is named after? Can somebody tell me? General Pat Cleburne. Can anybody tell me who he was? What made him famous? Well, this is what we call history. He was a major Confederate general, and many of the men who went off to war came through him. And also Lake Pat Cleburne is also named after General Patrick Cleburne. What about the demographics of Cleburne, Texas? The 2010 census has it this way. I'm going to use the term black, which is inclusive from my perspective, whatever blacks might call themselves, some African American. I like African American, but I'm going to use that term so that it's inclusive of all the groups of blacks. 1,290 blacks were here, according to the census, in 2010. That made up 4.4% of the population. For its whites, 24,159, which makes up 82.35% of Cleburne. Demographics for our Hispanics or Latino, 7,959 individuals, making up 27.13%, which means that our highest amount of residents of the whites with 82%, followed by the Hispanics, Latinos, 27%, and then followed by other races, a mixture of races, 9.36%. And the least, but not the less important, the 4.4% of the blacks that make up the city. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? First of all, we need it because it teaches us about the past. It also helps us to know where we're going in the present. And most of all, it opens the door for the future. That's why we're having this series here. It's very important. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? The legacy of East Cleburne gives us a glimpse of the black experience in Cleburne, Texas. Since I have been here, I have going around the city. Of course, we have blacks now scattered all over the city, but the majority are on what we call the side of East Cleburne. Majority of the Hispanics are also in East Cleburne. We are happy to see some of the progress that is taking place now in East Cleburne. It has not been. We see construction of homes all over the place now. I'm not sure who made those decisions, but those decisions have been made. And I'm very happy about that. Number 3 here, why the legacy of East Cleburne? It gives us a portrait of the effect of the Cleburnic society on blacks and the black impact within the Cleburnic society. That might be a new word for you, Cleburnic, but it just talks about Cleburne at large. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? It gives us a peek into the history, into the culture, social norms, and religion of East Cleburne. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? It acquaints us for the first time with many of the black pioneers and notable persons in East Cleburne. The question is, how many do you know that are notable? How many do you know that have accomplished many things here in East Cleburne? Who really knows the history of East Cleburne? Many don't know because they stayed on the west side. Others stayed right downtown. Now, East Cleburne downtown has a lot of historical things, but East Cleburne over here also has a history. And during this series, we will learn about the history of the famous East Cleburne. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? It reveals the contributions of blacks to the culture of Cleburne, either as part of or distinct from the mainstream Cleburne culture. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? It affords us a historical mirror that reflects the narrative of blacks in the Cleburnic society. Why the legacy of East Cleburne? The last one. The legacy of East Cleburne is the life story of many blacks in Cleburne and their influence upon the Cleburnic society. Come and join us every Thursday night for the next few months as we recapture the heritage and the history, the rich history of East Cleburne. For each month, we will be sharing different topics, explaining stories and contributions to the culture and society of East Cleburne. Come and join us. Thank you.
We're going to briefly look at some of the social factors that influenced cities to have areas like East Cleburne, particularly with names that made those places and those areas stand out, names that made them a little different from other parts of the city. Some of you have heard of names, if you've been in Chicago, like the South Side of Chicago. Or in Dallas, there's South Dallas. In Houston, Fifth Ward. And even in New Orleans, you've heard of, I think they call it the Lower Ninth Ward. In New York, there's Harlem. And in Cleburne, there's East Cleburne. Those are names that have been given to designated areas of parts of towns and cities in our country due to the fact that they are predominantly African American or minorities. Now, that hasn't always been the case. And when Councilman Warren comes up, he's going to really give us a good overview of that. But it did happen because of a set of events in our country during segregation, and particularly a set of events that were designed to cause separation of our races. One that we called was redlining. Redlining, of course, was outlawed in effect by the federal government almost 50 years ago. But it has not changed, for the most part, the makeup of the cities across this country. We still have those areas in cities that we call across the track, those areas that are different from the whole of the city, and therefore their history remains within the area. It is not shared as a whole body of the city. That, unfortunately, has happened in Cleburne, but not just Cleburne. It is an event or an activity that has happened all over our country. The redlining was caused by another factor that we called white flight. The white flight actually caused our division in cities being separated by races. So when cities were redlined, a sociologist, by the way, coined that term because banks began to draw red lines around areas where they would or would not loan money for either home improvements or buying homes. And they would draw blue lines around areas that were good to go, and white lines around areas that were really, really okay. You can come in and get along without much of anything. But the red-lined areas were the undesirable areas in our country. And this is how we got these things, these parts of cities called East Cleburne, called South Dallas, Fifth Ward. Those areas came about not necessarily because of the people who lived there not taking care of the area or even being forced to live together in one area of a city, but they actually came about because of governmental rules of segregation. White flight began to occur from areas that were redlined. And so as the whites who had the tax base, the money, moved out of those areas into more desirable areas, and who can blame them? That's really something we all desire the best for our families and our homes. But as they moved out, they took their tax base with them, the city's tax base, and left those areas where there was no attention given to the infrastructure. The streets became bad. All of the big major grocery stores and markets did not build over there. It was very difficult to get a loan, even to build a reasonable looking house or to repair or restore the house that you had. So we ended up with what we call places like East Cleburne. And in those areas that we call East Cleburne, we know that because you can't get big grocery markets to come in, some have become what we call food deserts. That is, there is no way to get fresh vegetables, fresh food into these areas, and people there either have to have means of transportation to go out of the area to buy fresh vegetables, or they can certainly go to the fast food places that just ran and built in those areas. McDonald's, Church's Chicken, they're all available. But that then had another problem because it began to affect the health of the children and the people who lived in those areas. Some cities are doing some things about that right now, just beginning to. Like in Dallas, they're beginning to bring in fresh vegetables that are left over, I guess, from some of the major chains. But all of these problems were created because of what we call the white flight. And so we get these areas like East Cleburne, where little attention is given to. But more than that, the attitude of the larger city is, can anything good come out of East Cleburne? And we say, yes, it can. And the larger city needs to embrace who we are as one and not as East Cleburne and Cleburne, that we're all one. But you've got to know the contributions made by those in the area of town despite the conditions that they had to live in. So that's what we're looking at tonight. We're going to be looking at how these areas all across the United States have developed and produced great leaders, many whose names are very, very not well known in cities and should be more known. As we've given more attention in our country to Black history, we've learned about some of the great contributions. But I dare say, on a broader level, that's fine. But what about your hometown? Do you know the African Americans who have made contributions and been successful in your own hometown? And that's what we'll be looking at tonight. The last thing I just want to call your attention to, several years ago, it doesn't seem like it's been 2005 is when Katrina struck. Right after then, following that, some colleagues, I worked with a group of my colleagues, I was a doctoral student, and we interviewed the elderly people, many elderly people, and we see elderly, we're saying 55 and over, so not really elderly, but those over 55, about what did it take? How did you, as an African American over 55, survive Katrina and live to tell the story? And that really becomes the question that we're looking at as we look at East Cleburne. How have those African Americans in designated areas like East Cleburne survived all of the inequities, the lack of tax money, the lack of food, the lack of health care? In many of these places, there's no health care that's accessible without going at least 5, 10, 15 minutes away. It's not within the community. How have you survived them? And if following our presentations, you can look at these charts, but the first chart gives the data on the research that we did. We actually interviewed several elderly, over 55 persons who were a part of Katrina, as I mentioned before. And they gave us several reasons, and that is what you're going to hear through all of these series from African Americans. Number one, they said they had constant communication with a higher power. And that is a theme that we find that allows South Dallas to continue to stay aboard water and even thrive and survive. That theme covers all of cities that have areas like East Cleburne. That is a theme that we'll see in East Cleburne, that number one is the constant contact with the higher power. And they also mention that miracles of faith in a higher power. That's another thing that we have seen over and over in communities like this, where they have been able to make it in spite of the neglect, the flooding, all of the sewage that comes from companies and that are in those areas, the asbestos and all of that. How have African Americans in these areas been able to survive? Miracles of faith, and that is to believe in a power that will help you or help them through this event, this place that we live in, these circumstances, no matter what. Their faith brought them through. And then the third thing they said was daily Bible reading. That theme you'll see over and over again. And we'll hear a little bit more tonight from Sister Zetta Rice, whose grandmother was one of the ones who kept the education going in this community. Happened over and over and over, not just here, but in all the communities. And then the very last thing that they said was actually just devotion, being devoted to a supreme being. So we're here just to let you know how those who survived in areas like this survived, and also to point out to you some of the success stories. Not everything bad comes out of East Cleburne. There have been many, many success stories. And because of the thrust on education and the firm belief in education, it will continue to be an area of Cleburne where good things are happening, and we want the whole city to celebrate it. Amen? All right. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn our series over to Reverend Warren, who actually is giving us the meat of the series. He's going to be talking about this series, day-to-day life in East Cleburne, and then Sister Zetta Rice will follow him, and he'll come back and close us out.
Good evening, Cleburne, Texas. Good evening, Cleburne, Texas. I am America. I am the darker brother. They send me to the kitchen to eat when company comes, but I laugh and I eat well, and I grow strong. Tomorrow I'll eat at the table when company comes, and nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they will see how beautiful I am and be ashamed, because I too am America. I want to share with you this evening right quickly, because we do have another program to attend this afternoon. But I grew up about 2 blocks from this particular area called Booker T. Washington campus. This is the actual gym that I played basketball in Booker T. Washington High School. Of course, it wasn't this beautiful, and it didn't look at all like this, but this is the structure. I graduated from Booker T. Washington in 1958, and we had a very good experience here. I want to just visit with you just a little bit on East Cleburne versus West Cleburne. A social construct, what is its meaning, and why does it exist? Why are we here? It is a natural inclination to encapsulate ourselves in a superior fashion with people who are just like us, and to assume that we are fulfilling the mandate of our lives if we just confine our love to our own family or to people who are similar and compatible. Such phenomena lends credit to the theory of social construct, which asserts that society places people in groups and favors certain groups over others. Accepted definition states that social construct is an idea or notion that appears to be obvious to a person who accepts it, although it is not reality. Humans learn social beliefs from birth, and as a result, they are participants in the social construct theory. This theory also includes race, asserting that race is also used to group and a class society. It is for this reason that we are here this evening to share with you our experiences as we toiled in this area identified as East Cleburne, the area known as just across the tracks. For practically all of my youth, the railroad tracks created the notion that somehow those who lived just across the tracks were somehow different if not inferior. I'm not sure that many of you in here realized, but the overpass was not there, and the tracks were there. And a lot of people lost their lives as a result of the ambulance trying to rush people to the hospital, and then stop there, and the train would stay on the tracks for looked like hours. And it was not until the late 80s and the mid 90s, and Gene Leach, who owned Leach Barbecue, was a primary person to approach the city council to build and construct the overpass as it exists today. And I was the vice chairman, he was the chairman, and I was the vice chairman, and we had a pretty hard struggle convincing the people that we needed that overpass there. And it's done a great thing for us. Conditions in East Cleburne. Let me just share with you right quickly. Many of you traveled, when you came in this afternoon, you traveled on Brazos Street. And during my youth, Brazos Street was the only street in East Cleburne that was paved. And it was used, the traffic was heavy on it simply because of the Santa Fe Railroad. There was about maybe as many as 1,800 employees during that time at Santa Fe Railroad. And the hours was from 8 to 4, and from 4 to 12, and from 12 to 8. And so Brazos Street was pretty busy all of the time. There were some businesses in the area. Neff Service Station was right there on the corner of Brazos Street and Hollingsworth. The little building there now is where the Hispanics have a church. That was Neff's filling station back during the time when I was a kid. There were grocery stores on the S-curve of Brazos there. Ed Gray's grocery store, R.C. Hicks grocery store, J.D. Kinnemer, and also a black-owned grocery store by the name of a gentleman, Clarence Cashman. There was a drugstore, and a white barber shop was there. And in April 15, 1916, the Dallas newspaper reports that Cleburne, Texas, opened its first black movie place, and it was owned by Ed Helms, who was a gentleman who lived here. Now, this area that you're sitting in right now, this area of town, this was referred to as the Timber. This is where a considerable concentration of black people lived. And from here to maybe to Robin Street was where the Timber was defined. And after you cross Brazos Street, after you cross Henderson Street, we had what we call Bedrock. That's where Miss Zetta Overton was from. And we used to kid each other about that. Are you from the Timber or are you from Bedrock? And when you crossed Highway 104, that was the Oak Hill area. That's where another concentration of black people live. And so those are the only areas that were black people, a concentration of black people in East Cleburne. But the living was okay. It was okay. We made do with what we had to do. All right, Booker T. Washington High School. I tell you what, our exhibit substantiates the education that occurred here at Booker T. Washington High School, the reputation that we had. Our teachers were in the business of unlocking potential, and that's just what they did. And they had a way of getting your attention whenever you did not want to participate. I'll tell you, it was okay. The experience at Booker T. Washington High School, there was no entrance exam that predetermined intelligence. There was no exit exam to determine whether you were qualified for graduation. Now, the proof that education actually occurred here is that there were no graduate schools for us to attend. And so we had to attend predominantly white schools, colleges, to get a master's or a PhD. And many graduates from here went on to get their doctorate degree and their PhD. I mean, so their master's degree and their doctorate degree after they finished here. Dr. James Sweat, who became one of the principals here, he was the first black to graduate from the University of Texas in Austin in the law school there. He had to petition the school in order to be enrolled. And he was denied that, and as a result, he had to file a lawsuit in order to get enrolled in there. But this shows you, that gives you some idea of the education that was taking place here at Booker T. Washington. School started after Labor Day. And the first day we were here at school, the principal would put us in the car and take us over to the Cleburne High School to get our books and materials for the year. Oftentimes the books were tattered and torn, pages were missing, but we made do, and we were educated. And so that is part of the history here in East Cleburne. Booker T. Washington was a great place to be. Our teachers cared for us. They loved us. They considered everyone here being able to learn. Even those who you could tell that there was some problems with the kids. They actually sat in the same environment with everybody else. There was no discrimination at all. And so we're just proud of the opportunity to present this legacy to you, to let you know that education was occurring in this area, and that some people left here and went on to do great things in our society. Just to mention a couple on the table here, our display. Sargent Wyckoff. I tell you what, you're talking about a proud man. Let me just read you a little bit about him. Sargent Wyckoff lived 2 blocks from where I lived, 502 Robin Street, not very far from here. All right, let me share part of this information with you. In 1935, Lieutenant Colonel Fred Armstrong selected Sargent Wyckoff to sound taps over the tomb of the unknown soldiers on Memorial Day at Arlington Cemetery in Washington, D.C. In 1934, Wyckoff competed in a National Bugle contest held at Fort MacArthur, California. Countless competitors came from the Army, Navy, and Marines. All in all, there were 64 hornblowers trying their best, but Charlie walked away with first place honors and a silver cup with apparent ease. Alerted for General, one of the highest verbal honors ever paid to a man was bestowed upon Wyckoff by an American great World War I military leader, General John Pershing. A few years ago, when General Pershing was very seriously ill in a military hospital in Arizona, he ordered Charlie Wyckoff to be alerted all during the many hours the general was close to death. He emphatically stated that he would have no one but Charlie to blow his taps in the event of his passing away. And so those are some of the people who lived right here in East Cleburne. And then another one is Dr. James Cash. Dr. James Cash was the first black basketball player at TCU. His mother was one of the teachers here. And I'll leave that up to, I'll let Zetta talk a little bit about her, but because she was her instructor when she was here. I graduated in '55, and I think Zetta graduated later on. But we are just grateful that that you came out and here with us to hear how it was that things were in East Cleburne during that time. We had a lot of fun here with our teachers and everything, and I can really tell some stories that occurred here at old Booker T. Washington High School, and it was great. The community was great. There were several activities going on in the community and everything, and we had a great time. But to a certain extent, that social construct is still here, even though the overpass has been built. There are many people living in Cleburne who've been living here for a long time who have never visited this area of town. And so that's one of the things that we are hoping that will change as a result of these programs that we're going to be putting on. And let me thank Ms. Easdon for her insight to get something like this going. When she was hired here as the director of the center, she made contact with me and let me know that she would like to know more about the area. And I praise her for that. And also Miss Lisa Majors. I tell you what, you can't beat a person like Lisa Majors. She's always there whenever you need her, from the Cleburne Independent School District. And also Miss Montero from the library. They have, not from the library, from the museum. They have been very helpful in getting this program started. And we hope that next month, when we come again, that you will come and be a part of the program. And we're going to have our poster boards here at each occasion, so you'll be able to be more familiar with the people involved in East Cleburne. So if there are not any questions, I'll just take my seat at this time. If there are some questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those for you. I've been here all of my life, and Cleburne is my home. I graduated in 1958, and I went off to college, and they gave me a degree. And I came back home, and I taught math and science in the Alvarado Independent School District for 2 years. Taught math and science in the Cleburne Independent School District for 8 years. And I served on the school board for 3 consecutive terms. And 1 year I was president of the board. And I'm currently on the city council now. And so I love Cleburne. This is my home. And I just want everybody to know in Cleburne, those that especially those who have never been over here, to know East Cleburne is here, and it's a part of Cleburne, Texas. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Zetta Overton Rice, and I am a product of East Cleburne and Bedrock, and I'm proud of it. I come from that time when the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." That's where I come from. It took a village, and that village was East Cleburne. And I am proud of it. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about myself. As Overtons, my family, the Overton family, has been here probably over 150 years. My father was Reverend Frank Overton. My grandmother was Geneva Overton. My brother, Lyndon Overton, is still here. And this is a place that I love. I finished high school here and went on to Texas College, which is a HBCU. But let me tell you a little bit more. I was one of three. Norma Lils Green, me, and Alicia Crockett were the first three blacks that Southwestern Bell hired here in Cleburne. I stayed here for a while before I moved on with AT&T and retired after 30 years as a technical sales manager. It wasn't easy, but it was done. And I got that background from right here in Cleburne at Booker T. Washington. Let me tell you a little bit about Geneva Overton. Geneva Rice Overton. She was born in 1894 in Ruston, Louisiana, and she died here in Cleburne on July the 5th, 1968. She had always, as a little girl, she would tell me how she got started. She loved children, and she wanted to teach school. So she did attend Texas College and took child development courses. And after she got through with that, she opened the first nursery. It was called the Gay Nursery and Kindergarten School here in Cleburne, and it's the only place that blacks had to send small children. And she would take them from 6 months up until it was time for them to go to first grade. By herself, with sometimes my mother helping, and maybe one other one. She got some funding from Church Women United that helped out. But let me tell you, she earned the respect and the love of most of the children that was in Cleburne that came to her, and most of them was after World War II, is when she got most of those children. She opened the nursery school in 1941. That was to help out mothers who was working and had to have small children in school, and she took them in at that time. And they nicknamed her Big Mama, and that name stayed with her for the rest of her life. We all know her as Big Mama, and everybody knew her as Big Mama School. Her first kindergarten class graduated in 1947, and I think there's pictures of them over there now. Her first graduating class. And it was often said that if you went to Big Mama School, you could skip first grade and go on to second grade. And let me tell you why. And it wasn't because she was a disciplinarian, yes, but it was the love that she had. She would always start off with morning devotion. You were going to have morning devotion. There was a song, prayer, the pledge to allegiance to the flag, pledge to the Bible. You were going to have that, and a Bible verse. That was her thing. You were going to have that when you got to school that morning. A lot of times the mothers would bring children, they'd be crying and screaming and didn't want to stay, and she said, just leave them, and you leave, because as long as you're here, they won't be quiet. And when the mother came back, the child didn't want to leave. Big Mama was just that good. I have never known anybody that could discipline you and you love her like that. She was a great teacher. She taught, let me tell you some of the things that she taught, and then you'll understand. When you left Big Mama and went to first grade, you knew how to read Dick, Jane, and Spot. Do anybody know about Dick, Jane, and Spot, and how to see Spot run and see Dick run? Okay, we had those books, and you were going to learn that. She taught you that you would know your parents' name, your address, and your phone number if you had a phone at that time. A lot of us did not. You learned to count from 1 to 100. You learned your ABCs. She taught you the days of the weeks, the months of the year, how to spell them and how to write them. She taught you the members of the family, how to spell them and how to write them. That's father, mother, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, grandmother, grandfather. You learned all of that. You knew that when you left. You learned how to read, and you learned simple math like adding and subtraction. So when you got to first grade, you were way ahead of everybody else. She would tell you, she would teach you how to tell time and how to count money. Those are the things you knew when you left Big Mama's school. And then she had the Bible teachings, the biblical things. You would learn the 23rd Psalms, the Lord's Prayer, and she taught you to learn at least one Bible verse. You were going to know that before you left her school. And there are some here that went to her school. I think I see Yvonne Ingram back there. She went. I think did one of you two go? And I went. Yeah, and Reverend Warren's, all of his children went. Demetrius, all of them went. They all went to her school. And she taught until her death in 1968. She died in 1968. But my father donated all of because when she started the school, she had it in her home. Then she bought the building next door to her and had the school there. And the little furniture, the tables and chairs were donated to her by the Church Women United. And after she died, my dad donated all of that so that we started the Geneva Overton Childhood Experiences Center. We started it at Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church in their basement, because I taught there for a while before I started working for Southwestern Bell. She donated all of that information, all the books, everything that she had. My dad donated it to them. There was a board of directors set up that my family was a part of that board of directors. Miss Gloria Scales at that time became the director of that. And later on, they moved the school to here at Booker T. Washington. It became Geneva Overton Childhood Experiences Center until it closed. And I'm not sure when they closed it. But it was to see her with those children. They all loved her. One of my friend's son one day, we were talking, and I was with his mom. We was in the car, and we passed the school. It's the old building. It was old, tattered and torn and beat up, but inside there was all that love that you could feel. And as we passed it, he looked at it and he said, "There's my school, and I think it's just beautiful." And I looked at him and I thought, he think that's beautiful, it's about to fall down. But to him, he knew there was love there and what he learned. And he is now a dentist. He's a doctor. So that's what it took over here in East Cleburne. I am proud of it. I am proud of being a product of here and being a product of Bedrock. Regardless of what happened, what went on, we were taught, we were loved, and we were taught that we could be something special. And so that always stayed in my mind And I was able to give that to my children. You are something special, no matter what color you are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What it is the love in your heart. My grandmother died from a heart attack. And we always said it's because she had so much love in her heart for everybody, all the kids that she had, that her heart just couldn't hold anymore, that it just could not hold anymore. But I won't ever forget what she left for me and my family, and the legacy she left here in East Cleburne. Thank you.
Again, we want to thank you for coming to this, our first dialogue series. We will have speakers at some of the other ones. We're hoping to get Dr. James Cash to come in when we do the piece on education. And then there are others that we're really hoping to bring back who have been a part of this wonderful legacy, as Sister Zetta just so beautifully described by her grandmother. So again, are there any questions, or before we dismiss, any questions or comments that you would like to contribute or ask? All right. Thank you for coming. Yes, yes. From what I understand, I can't answer that, but I know John Warren can. It was not always minority. This area wasn't minority at all, but because of the white flight, that whites moved out. He has shown there were many places in East Cleburne where whites actually lived, so he can answer that a little better than I can. Not a Cleburneite, but I love Cleburne.
This was what.
Actually, my question is, if it's, okay, I'm thinking predominantly the blacks over here, right, this thing, and then you have other minority groups.
This particular area was where the greatest concentration of black people lived, but they were not the dominant group. The dominant group in this area were whites, and still is. But this is the area where we were restricted to live. And this particular area, say from Park Street, where Carver Park is, over to Robin Street, where I live, was referred to as the timber. And then beyond that, was predominantly white. For an example, Brazos Street up here, North Brazos, was all white people. No black people lived up there on that area. See, all that. And then when you crossed Henderson Street was where Zetta and all her family lived, and they called that Bedrock. And then when you went beyond Highway 104, that was the Oak Hill area. That was another great concentration of black people out there. Can you understand him? Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, each presentation is going to overlap, and we're going to have these posters here for your perusal every time we have the program. Yeah, and we encourage dialogue. We really do. Are there any other questions or concerns?
And remember, in connection to your question, remember that although there were different groups, those groups did not necessarily intermingle.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
Come on, Zetta. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So the African Americans in East Cleburne wouldn't necessarily know about the experiences of Hispanic Americans, or even, of course, we all know the whites because they were the ones.
Except my neighborhood was different. Let me tell you a little bit about Bedrock. Where I lived in the house, my family home is still there. Right across the street from me was a white family. Right behind me was a white family. On the left side of me was 2 Hispanic families. Down the street from me were black families. Yvonne, she lived down there on Chambers, where Charles Johnson lived. I think that was completely black. But on my street, it was all different. And we all played together. We played together. But my friend asked me, well, why do you go to school that way and I have to go? That's the way it was. I went to school here, she went over there. But it was a mixed neighborhood, and we just never, that's just the way it was. And you didn't ask a whole lot of questions. You did what you were told to do.
Now that's interesting. I learned something from that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Please encourage others to come out and take part in this. I am a stickler for the history of Cleburne, especially this particular area of Cleburne. And I'm sure that you're going to enjoy much of what we have to tell you and what we have to share with you.
And we won't keep you any longer than an hour and a half. At 5:30, you'll be out by 7. So again, thanks for coming. Enjoy the cookies and the drinks, and we thank Ms. Easdon for making sure that those were prepared.